thank you to my audience for being here today. I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine that you're with me in your own backyard. The air is cool and crisp. The leaves are just starting to turn to the tinges of orange and red, and off in the distance you can hear this familiar honking sound. You look up and your eyes scan the sky until on the horizon you finally find it, a familiar V-shaped formation of geese flying south for the winter. At last, it's migration season. Ever since I've been a little boy, I was fascinated by the birds that I saw in my own backyard. It's rare that you see such intricacy and detail in such a creature that's so small. The swift wings and the tiny feathers of my own birds inspired me to learn more, and so my exploration took me to reading books, to searching the web, visiting the aviaries, and feeding the birds in my backyard. And on several occasions, may have included inviting the birds into my house. I think the birds enjoyed that about as much as my parents did. Now, did you know that the birds in your own backyard very likely see more of the world than you have? Look out the window and find one of our little friends, or picture one in your mind. Chances are his vacation last year was to a more exotic location than yours was. You see, while our beach vacations and winter cruises are simply to relax or to get away from work or homework, birds migrate as a matter of survival. So I'm going to show you today a couple of the reasons why they take such an incredible journey, the journey that they do take every year, and how we as humans play a role in a pattern that has been going on for centuries. So birds may migrate for several reasons. First of all, they may migrate because the change in temperature necessitates a warmer climate for them. They need a consistent supply of food, and they need a place where they can raise their young and nest that's safe and familiar to them. And with the increasingly urban landscape that we live in, we're starting to play a larger and larger role in that migration. So let's take a look at a few of those reasons. According to the Cornell Labs website all about birds, the main reason that birds will migrate is due to a change in their resources. So in the spring, when the weather is warm and the birds start to come back up from where they were in the south, it's usually because the warmer temperatures brought about more food and places that they can nest from the blooming plants. When the weather turns cold in the winter, they're going to move down south because the plants and the insects begin to die. The resources that they need are running out. So there's a lot of different types of migration. Seasonal migration is the one that we're most familiar with, and that's illustrated quite nicely here in this map of bird flyways from BirdLife International. Now, as you can see, there's 8 major migratory bird flyways that they use when they migrate seasonally. And this is a pretty good idea of how migration works, but as we learned from a wonderful article in The Spruce, which is a bird blog, there's actually many different types of migration. So seasonal migration is the most well-known, and for good reason. It's the most widely seen across species. And that can include birds who go north to south like this. That's called latitudinal migration, and it's across the latitudinal lines. And there's other birds that will migrate east to west or west to east. And that's called longitudinal migration because it goes across the longitudinal lines. Now, a lot of birds will migrate, and they're not migrating just down south, they're migrating down. A lot of the birds that live up in the high altitude in the mountains will come down to a lower elevation in the wintertime when the heavy snowfall makes it difficult for them to fly and makes finding food a real issue. So a lot of times they will just simply fly down the mountain and we get to see them. And that's called altitudinal migration. Birds don't like snow days quite as much as we do. Another type of migration is called loop migration. And it's exactly as it sounds. Birds will take one pathway down and another pathway back up. And usually that's because they need to find food, and the food supply they have on the way down is not the same. So they're going to have to pick a different route to make sure they have what they need. That's, again, loop migration. Finally, birds may migrate temporarily so they can molt. Now, if you don't know what molting is, it's when birds lose their feathers in order to make room for new growth. And while this little fluffy transition might be rather amusing, it's also can affect their ability to fly, which leaves them vulnerable. So hopefully the last time that you had a bad hair day is probably embarrassing, but hopefully not life-threatening. So I want you to think back to that vacation that we talked about at the beginning. Where did you go last year? Maybe you went to St. George for the weekend, or maybe you went to Disneyland in California. You might have even hopped on a plane and flown to Hawaii. Now, if you did, you're one of the lucky ones, and you probably flew out of California. Now, from California to Hawaii is 2,471 miles. It's not bad, but some of our little friends still have you beat. Let's check out some amazing facts from the American Bird Conservancy and try to wrap our heads around this amazing journey that our friends take, all right? Now, the Arctic tern can fly more than 49,700 miles each year. That's the equivalent of flying completely around the world twice. Now, you put those kind of miles on your car, you'll be lucky if your motor is going to last you more than a couple years. This bird does that every year. The bar-tailed godwit flies 7,000 miles non-stop on their journey. I don't know if you'd be tired after your flight to Hawaii. That takes you about 4 to 5 hours to cover that distance. This bird's doing 7,000 miles straight, and there's no flight attendant to offer them stale pretzels along the way. All right. So how far do you think you could run? How fast do you think you could go? Probably not as much as a bird. Birds can fly anywhere from 15 to 55 miles per hour, almost highway speeds. And they can cover distances in excess of 600 miles a day. It's just a little bit longer than your average marathon. Now, you're probably wondering, where do we fit into all this? I'm glad you asked. There's a lot of intricacies at play here in nature, and we humans actually play a surprising role. So remember, birds migrate when they run out of resources that they need. And as humanity is continually moving towards a more urban landscape, a lot of the natural habitats that birds have are being converted into our natural habitat. So as what they're used to for finding food leaves, they're going to start moving other places where they can be more comfortable. And here's a fun one. Did you know that most birds migrate at night? The cooler temperatures actually allow them to go farther distances without getting overheated and fatigued. And most likely, predators are a little less likely to find them at night. Now, the International Dark Sky Association teaches us that as birds fly over urban areas, the artificial light from homes and cities can actually disorient them and cause them to crash. So drawing our shutters and our curtains and turning off excess lights can actually help them on their journey. So we've covered a lot. So to recap here, birds migrate for a lot of reasons, but mostly it's because they need the resources to survive. That can include having the right food that they need, the right climate and a warm temperature, and a safe place for them to nest. And we humans play a surprisingly large role in their migration. So the next time that you go outside and see that V formation in the sky, now you're going to know just a little bit more about the amazing journey that our feathered friends are taking. Thank you.